Hey everybody, I'm Candace Shigley with Utah State University Extension and the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping, and you are watching our Water Well with CWEL webinar series.
Well, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm going to give you a quick intro to Flume, just about who we are and what we do. And then we're going to dive into some both indoor and outdoor water use data. But first, I just want to give you a little bit of context about Flume. And our company motto is you can't measure what you can't manage what you can't measure. And water data is locked in most cases, a very dirty pit with lots of creepy crawly animals in it, out at your curb or in your lawn. And unless you're going to go look at that meter, you really have no idea how much water you're using. And, in order to really understand how to conserve water, or even just understand where you're using water and how you're using it, it's a really hard thing to do. And that's really what we're all about. And the founders of our company basically struggled with that problem. The company was started in the last drought, and we may just be in permanent drought now, but 2 droughts ago, their water company was asking them to save water. And they're like, well, I don't even know how much water I'm using. I don't know where I'm using water. So how do you expect me to save water? So that was really why they came up with Flume. And Flume is basically this device that straps around your existing water meter. And what it allows you to do then is, once you install it, is right from your smartphone, you as a homeowner can understand down to the minute in real time where you're using water and how you're using water and how much water you're using. And also, it turns out now that we have tens of thousands of these throughout the United States, we have a treasure trove of data that's very interesting to water utilities. It's very interesting to states, it's planning agencies, to consultants who are trying to help utilities project water use into the future. It's helpful for conservation professionals who are trying to understand where they should spend their conservation dollars. Should they continue to fund toilet replacement programs? Should they continue to fund low flow shower head replacement programs? So we can provide this treasure trove of data both to the homeowner as well as to the utilities themselves. And then once these devices are strapped to the meter, as I said before, the homeowner right from their smartphone has access to their water use all the time. And it's amazing when people get this device installed and they see that every time they water their front lawn, it's 1,000 gallons. And oh, by the way, the gardener set their water to, water for 3 hours at 2 a.m. every morning. They had no idea. It's amazing what you can learn when you can actually see this data. And then also we provide our utility partners with a dashboard that allows them to be able to monitor all of these devices inside of their districts as well. Just really quickly, a look at the app. As I said before, a homeowner can basically see in real time how much water they're using all the way down to the minute. If there are leaks, we will notify a homeowner of that they have a leak. We'll show them when it started, how big it is. We also now offer discounted services if they need a plumber to come out and help them fix that leak. And then we also provide a way for them to set up budgets as well. And this is getting increasingly important, especially in California, where increasingly utilities are actually putting restrictions on homeowners on how much water they can use per month before they start getting fined some pretty significant amounts. So how does this all work? So basically, as I said before, we're collecting data from lots and lots of flumes across the nation. And we're collecting this data every 5 seconds. And it turns out when you collect this data every 5 seconds, you can apply some machine learning to this water use and start to break it into its component parts. At its highest level, we're breaking that data down into indoor and outdoor use. And very soon, like within a month or 2, we will then have the ability to break that data down even further into its component uses, for instance, showers and toilets and wash machines and dishwashers, et cetera. And if you look at this data, this is kind of a cool view of 1 month of data, 1 month of data. Every horizontal line here is 1 day. And it's kind of in 3D here. So basically what you're going to see here is you have on every day of the month pretty much is this very this watering that happens pretty much at the same time every day throughout the month. And that's basically timed irrigation. This person obviously has a clock irrigation timer that's going off at the same time every day for the same amount of time. And then over here, it turns out this is a large irrigation event that was manual. Turns out this was actually a pool fill. Somebody filled their pool here. But it's kind of cool to see all these little peaky things here. And you can start to pull out, what's indoor and outdoor when you apply some machine learning to this data. Here's another example of another home. And again, you see irrigation. This isn't quite as frequent, but every time it does happen, it looks pretty much the same as it did before, both in the morning and the evening. And then also this person has a water softener. And you can see here that it goes off, fairly regularly at probably 2 in the morning. And most people don't even know that their water softeners use water. And things like this are kind of very eye-opening to people when they kind of see, oh, wow, these things are actually using quite a bit of water. So I'm going to turn it over to Peter to talk a little bit about kind of the granularity of this data and why it's important that we're collecting data so often every 5 seconds.
Well, thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. So, I spent the first 20 years of my career working on a series of end-use studies where we installed data loggers on water meters and collected data for 2 weeks at a time. And over that period of time, we probably collected data from 3,000 houses, maybe 3,500 would be my outside guess. The data that you were showing from Flume comes from tens of thousands. It's an order of magnitude different. And it's that to have high resolution data from that many households it's a remarkable game changer. So let's go look at the next slide. So most utilities, I would say most, I say many utilities dream of having hourly data. And and there's a lot of folks that do pretty good things analyzing hourly data. But let's see really what you can see from hourly data versus what happens when you zoom in on it. So here's some consumption that occurred at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and 4 a.m. in the morning in day in June in 2020. So the middle of the night, what could it be? Let's look. So if we change to a minute view, we see, wow, it's actually not 3 lumps. It's actually looks like it might be 6 different discrete uses of water. Something's going on, but it's still not a clear, apparent picture of what this use of water would be specifically. And then, but at the 5-second level, you see 6 very well organized water uses. That is a dishwasher. That is the standard 6 cycles of a dishwasher. And then there's a toilet flush that occurs right at 4 a.m. Right before the final cycle of the dishwasher. So that's just one example of kind of when you go from high to hourly data to high frequency. Let's check out another one. So this is 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. on July 5th in 2020, just at one particular house. So if we then look at the minute level, so this actually shows the value of minute data, because at the minute level, you can start to see an automatic irrigation system emerging. You can see 3 distinct zones, but the rest of it is fairly murky. And then if you go to 5-second, you can actually see very clearly the 3-zone automatic irrigation system, but you can also see some other uses occurring simultaneously with that irrigation system that are toilet flushes, faucets, uses, and other things that are occurring inside the house. So that sort of exposes the complexity of the signals, and from that level, household level data, Flume is doing something really remarkable, and that they created this household water use index, which then amalgamates data from all of the Flume devices that are installed all around the country, and reports on it. And we started to present these data every quarter. And so we're going to start to talk about the data and show you data from that goes all the way through June of 2021. So extremely recent information.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Let me, I'll set this up and we can start to analyze some of this data together here. So as Peter said, we now have, these Flume devices all over the nation. So this gives you kind of an idea of the hot spots of where we have lots of Flume. Red indicates areas where we have high concentrations of Flume. A lot in California. We're based in California. Drought pressure is high in California. Conservation pressure is high in California, same as in Texas. So those are really our two biggest markets. But it's interesting, we have a lot of flumes in places of the country like the Midwest where water is cheap and conservation is not top of mind, but people buy our devices because they want protection from leaks. So we have a lot of partnerships with insurance companies that encourage people to get flumes, and we'll give them discounts on their insurance if they get flumes. So we have like concentrations of areas like Chicago, for instance, and even places like Atlanta, where again, conservation is not really top of mind, but people want their flumes anyways. So we have a vast treasure trove of data. What we're going to look at today mostly are the top 15 biggest metro areas. The largest being the New York area. And this isn't just New York City, this is New York City and the surrounding area. This isn't just Los Angeles, it's Los Angeles and the surrounding area. So these are the top biggest 15 metro areas. And you'll see when I say Los Angeles, it's this giant area as an example of kind of LA and the surrounding area. Same here for San Francisco. It's not just San Francisco, it's the East Bay. It's, it's a large area. So let's first take a look at, if we looked at every flume in the United States and looked at trends in indoor water use, what will we see? Well, this is what you'd see. And let me set this up and I'll have Peter do a little analysis here. Along the x-axis here, we have basically time. So going all the way back to Q4 2019. This is back before anybody knew what COVID was. So we're calling this a normal quarter. And then we're taking it through COVID here. We'll talk about that in a second, all the way through this last quarter. On the y-axis, what we have is the average indoor use per person per day. So for instance, in Q4 2019, the average indoor use per person per day was 45.1 gallons. So Peter, I'll turn this over to you. I think the most obvious thing on this chart is this anomaly here in the middle.
Yeah, the COVID bump. I think it's important to point out that when everyone installs their Flume, they respond to a brief set of questions, and that's when actually people tell how many people live in the home. And so about something north of 95% of the people actually provide that information. And so we only include the people in this analysis who did give us that information. But we think it's amongst the better measurements of per capita use because people are actually providing accurate information on the number of people in their home. So this starts off in the fourth quarter of 2019 with an average of 45.1 gallons per person per day indoors. And that actually is a relatively efficient level of water use if we compare it with other research studies that have been done. And we've shown the trajectory of indoor water use is coming down. The first end-use study found indoor use to be about 69 gallons per person per day. Then 15 years later, it had gone down to about 56 gallons per person per day. So now we're showing that it's actually gone down below 50 gallons per person per day here in the mid-40s. And it goes along in the mid-40s until we have this anomalous experience called the COVID pandemic. And what occurs in April and early May is really an extraordinary event in indoor water use that was experienced across the country at every single city that we look at for the Flume data, and there's just this remarkable spike. The variability in the spike, if some homes were using 4 or 5 times as much water indoors as they would normally use. It didn't quite double on average, but it went up by a substantial percentage. This is when the federal government basically said to stay home for a couple of weeks, and there is increased toilet flushing, there's increased faucet use. We all know what occurred. We all lived through it. We were cooking more. We were all just doing everything at home. All those flushes were occurring at home instead of at work. So then that ended, and most people went back, but there was still a substantial component of elevated water use, and it slowly stair-stepped down until we've come back, and now we're just about 1 gallon per capita per day higher on average than where we started from. So will that remain a measurable difference? We will see. Our next quarterly update will be coming in, I believe, early November. But I think this really does tell the story of the pandemic, and we're working on an article that's going to be published in the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineering journal, that's going to document very specifically what occurred, particularly during the lockdown periods. And when we zoom in on that, we can identify changes in water use associated with even specific federal orders. So it's a very interesting, hopefully anomalous thing that we'll never live through again.
Yeah, and I think too, Peter, it's pretty interesting to take a look at the differences in indoor water use by metro area. So just to set this up, what we're looking at here is just Q2 of 2021. So basically last quarter.
So 3 months of use.
April, May, and June of this year. And what we did over here, what we're looking at is the average indoor water use per person per day in each of these metro areas. And pretty big disparity here, huh, Peter?
Well, it is surprising. I mean, that you could have one metro area as low as 40 and another, the almost 20, 16, 17 GPCD higher. On the other hand, even the 57.5 at Phoenix is comparatively efficient. If you think about where we've come from, over 25 years, that still represents a remarkable improvement. Now we're going to study more about why water use is higher in Phoenix, as in the coming months, Flume is going to be able to disaggregate between indoor and outdoor, and also between toilets and clothes washers and faucets and evaporative coolers, things like that, which we think could be the difference here. When you look like Chicago is the next highest indoor, you might think, oh, well, that's probably leaks and maybe older fixtures or something, But honestly, there is no, I think until you break down and disaggregate, we're not going to truly understand why we see these differences, other than for the efficient places where we know they must have efficient fixtures and toilets. You would not be able to achieve levels in the low 40s without having particularly efficient fixtures indoors. But this also tells us that, over a large number of homes, these relatively efficient levels of water use are perfectly possible. We've conducted studies on retrofit homes and on brand new homes that showed that around 30 to 35 gallons per capita per day indoors is certainly technically achievable with modern fixtures and appliances, without changing behavior. So the same number of flushes, just do it with lower volume. And so you can get down to 35 gallons per person per day. What these data are showing is that many people are approaching that level of efficiency, even across broad numbers of homes. There's still room for improvement, but it's if you look at this over the long term, as I kind of have over 25 years, it's quite satisfying to see how indoor use has actually come down, and then to think, and there's still room for further efficiency in the future. It's a good news story. So let's take a look at outdoor use, because I think there's probably a lot of folks on the call who are particularly interested in outdoor use.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point, Peter. We may be even approaching maximum efficiency indoors. So this is the last frontier here, I think, is perhaps to take a look at what's going on outdoors. And I think that that's something that this group is actually pretty focused on. And what we're taking a look at here, just like our indoor curve, we're looking at the same 7 quarters, basically going from Q4 2019 all the way through last quarter. And on the y-axis, what we're looking at here is the average gallons used per household per day. So we're not looking at per capita anymore. We're looking at per household, which we think makes more sense for outdoor use. And I think the obvious things here, obviously people are using more water outdoors in the summer, using less water in the winter. What may not be obvious is, and I think an assumption a lot of utilities make, is that this water perhaps goes to near zero in the winter. And depending on where you are in the nation, that may or may not be true.
Almost never true. That's what we're seeing.
That's what we're finding.
At least not truly absolute zero. It appears that winter watering is a common phenomenon, in many places. I mean, it has to be a pretty dang cold climate. Even we're seeing in parts of Colorado, people will water trees. They're not running their irrigation system. We're not talking about automatic irrigation in cold climates, but there's definitely occurrences of winter watering, even in climates where you might not anticipate it. In warmer climates, though, as we'll show you in some of the next charts, though, you can see high levels of irrigation all throughout the year.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at that. So now let's look at these same top 15 metro areas. And just to set this up, here on the y-axis, again, we're looking at average gallons per household per day. On the x-axis now is each metro service area. And we're just looking at Q2 2021. So basically, again, last quarter.
3 months.
So in Q2 21, Phoenix was using both most indoor water as well as the most outdoor water, which is interesting. But again, it was the hottest of any of these metro service areas. It was average of 86 degrees.
And it had the least rain.
With basically zero rain. But you can tell there's this, just by eyeballing this, that the amount of outdoor water people use is pretty correlated to how much rain. These top 4 metro areas that had the most water basically had zero rain. So that kind of explains why all of this water here. And temperatures were pretty similar, but certainly the hotter climates were using more water.
Yep, and when we're thinking about household level outdoor water use, ideally we would like to have measurements of the landscape area, and so we could construct water budgets. And actually, we're working on that. That's something that was coming in the future for Flume users. Will be able to develop estimates of water of what would be reasonable use, or they can get it from their utility if they have their own water budget. Because we think that'll be one of the important ways people use the device is to monitor their outdoor use and track their outdoor use versus perhaps an established target that might be set up in the future. But let's look at how this next chart is particularly interesting for looking at how water use tracks, outdoor use tracks across the year in different geographies, really.
Yeah, just set this one up. In green here, we're looking at outdoor water use in Los Angeles. This peak here was the summer of 2020. This leading up to this peak is leading up to the peak of summer of 2021. And so Los Angeles again is green. And then down here we have Atlanta. So those two curves are vastly different.
Well, Atlanta, first of all, has highly efficient water use. I worked on a Supreme Court case for Georgia, and so I'm pretty familiar with their usage. So they basically don't have very much outdoor use to begin with. We would suspect Flume users might have higher outdoor use, so there is some. but they also have quite a bit of precipitation, and basically landscapes there often can rely effectively on available natural precipitation, and that's not the case in many other places, and like Los Angeles. And so, yeah, in Los Angeles, particularly during the summer months, substantial supplemental irrigation is required for the landscapes, and really that's the story that you're seeing. So let's plunk up a couple other cities. Miami is kind of interesting. So there's another warm climate where you kind of see water use going throughout the year, but there are definite differences based on the specifics of each month and what the weather that is being experienced. That's another thing that we've seen from looking at the household level data and also the utility scale data, and we'll get into that a bit in the next section, is how much customers actually respond to climate. And it's remarkable the level of response that you'll see to individual uses. Let's keep going. I'm going to just put up a couple of ones to see, East, Midwest. Okay, so there's Chicago. So there's definitely a summer component to Chicago's seasonal pattern, and there's Seattle's looking pretty similar. I could also point out that all of the data we're showing you today are part of a Tableau dashboard, which is published online, and we'll give you the address at the end of the presentation, but you can go to this website and explore these data yourselves, click through all these same graphs, interact, turn things on and off, print things. It's a remarkable presentation that Flume has put together and made available for folks.
Well, great. Well, let's shift gears now and talk a little bit about the drought. It's kind of top of mind for a lot of people. I know there's a lot of people on this webinar from California, even Utah, I know, has also been affected by the drought. And we have several customers who implemented drought restrictions very early on in this current drought, Marin County being one of them. And let me set up this chart first of all. What we're looking at here is outdoor water use in Marin County for last quarter. And we're looking at every day of the quarter. So basically we're looking at April, May, and June of this year. In blue is the actual average outdoor water use per day in Marin County. And then in orange, what we've overlaid is the evapotranspiration curve. And ordinarily what we see is that the outdoor water use and this ET curve track very closely together. But what you're going to see in this graph here is that right around May, these two curves started to diverge. And Peter, why don't you give us the punchline?
The punchline. It's unfortunately, the punch in the gut line. Marin water was sort of ground zero for the drought in California. Their reservoirs reached critical levels, and they started imposing mandatory drought restrictions and limitations on irrigation. And so that's really what occurred. And so the water usage no longer started tracking closely with evapotranspiration. There's still some patterns where you can see that people are responding, particularly there's where Joe's got the cursor, there's a drop in usage that corresponds very much to the drop in ET that is associated with the precipitation that occurred at that time. But still the overall average stays considerably lower. The sad part of the story that as good as this is, this definitely shows a strong response in Marin. It wasn't as much as they'd hoped for, and so they actually had to impose stronger restrictions. And so we'll be looking at their data, going into the next quarter. They're seeking 40% demand reductions based on their current supply conditions.
Yeah, and this is worrisome here towards the end. It's pretty good here, but then you start to see this starting to track up again.
Yeah,
which wasn't good. And that's about when they decided to impose those stronger restrictions. Here's another view of the same data. But here in blue, we're looking at Marin's outdoor water use, again, every day of last quarter. And then in orange, that is the average outdoor water use in the rest of California. And then in yellow, we're looking at just Los Angeles. So you see here, you kind of this general trend for California and Los Angeles is up. And then kind of again, starting in May, you see Marin not tracking that same way. It's basically, more or less flat, whereas these kind of have this upward trajectory.
Yeah, and also they substantially eliminated the peakiness of their demand pattern, which you see in some of the April usage, which when presumably it wasn't even full on summer yet. It's interesting how there also are some similar patterns even across the rest of California and Marin and also with LA. All weather is local, but there still are there's some things that are clearly impacting broader geographies, which is kind of I don't know if it's surprising, but the patterns of the water use that we've seen when we look across different geographies, it's stark when you see similarities, but also stark when you see differences. Let's take a look at Las Vegas.
Yeah, before you go there, too, one thing that struck me about this graph that's really apparent here is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There's a really timed irrigation affects outdoor water use a lot. And we see that really often. And it's really, significant in this graph. Every peak here is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. People tend to irrigate for whatever reason on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, a little less, and weekends even less.
That's a great point, Joe. And I would say that's largely because they're told to water on those days.
That is true. In fact, here's a great example where people are being told when to water. So now what we're looking at is we're looking at Las Vegas, and we're looking at each of these boxes is a quarter. So going back to Q2 of 2020, so Q3 2020, Q4 2020, et cetera. And then in the quarter, what we're doing is we're looking at the average of all Sundays, all Mondays, all Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, et cetera. And then the same for each quarter. And what you're going to notice here is that Sunday is the outlier in every one of these. And again, I'll leave the punchline to you.
Never on Sundays in Las Vegas. This is an effect of a mandatory watering restriction policy, which you're not allowed to use automatic irrigation on Sundays. It's strictly forbidden across Las Vegas. Other days of the week are assigned, I believe, to 3 days. They have an orderly assignment. But Sundays, the only thing you're allowed to do is hand water with a hose, or I guess fill your pool, perhaps might still be permitted. So it's remarkably effective. I don't know if we can show the hockey player, but they put together a public information campaign with the Golden Knights hockey team in Las Vegas that, where the guy looks like he's ready to take your head off if you water on Sundays.
Yeah, never on Sundays.
They do conservation messaging very effectively in Las Vegas.
Well, they do more than messaging; they actually do enforcement. Hence why there's such a radical, behavior change of the customers there. They literally go around. They have people that go around and give tickets if they see watering on the wrong days. And also, there's rules in Vegas about when you can water, not only what day you can water, but what times you can water. So what I'm looking at here is just June of 2021. And what we did is we basically looked at all the Sundays averaged, all the Mondays averaged, all the Tuesdays, et cetera, in June, and then looked at all of the 1 a.m.s on Sunday average. So for instance, on Sunday, as we said before, people are watering very little to begin with. However, on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, they are watering. This is the peak time that they're watering: 6 a.m. on Monday, 6 a.m. on Tuesday, 6 a.m. on Wednesday, 6 a.m. on Thursday. But they have a rule in Vegas that you can't water between, and I meant to look this up, but it's basically corresponds with this trough here. And if we actually zoom into this trough, let's just look at Wednesday here. You can see here that people are pretty good. I believe it goes 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. I think is what the restriction
That's right.
is.
I think that's right.
So, I mean, you can see here, I mean, the response is pretty incredible, actually.
Oh yeah, the people are following the rules. They're absolutely
Yeah.
following the rules. The only thing that I was struck by is that people prefer not to take advantage of the opportunity to water at 11 to 3 a.m. So there's definitely a tendency to want your irrigation to come on so that you can see it operate, perhaps, and to know that it has functioned. That's definitely, I think, why people are setting them to come on when they do, or that with the evening peak, because there's no reason that people couldn't irrigate, between 11 and 12 at night, if they had chosen to do so.
Yeah, that's pretty low here. Pretty amazing. Well, great. Those were all the charts we were going to show you guys, and we wanted to leave some time for questions. So, Candace, maybe you can throw us a few questions.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you, guys. If you do have questions, please type them into the Q&A box. It just helps me stay organized. And then also, when you leave this event, you're going to get prompted to do a survey. It just takes like 2 minutes. If you could fill that out for us, we'd really appreciate it. Okay, first question is about Utah. Do you guys have any ideas on how Utah's indoor and outdoor water use compares to the national average?
Yeah, first of all, we're sorry that we didn't include Utah in that. There's unfortunately no Utah cities that are in the top 15 metro areas. We're starting to get a good concentration of devices around Salt Lake City, and we are starting to look at that. The challenge we have in Utah is that the meter pits are not easy to access. They have locks on the lids, they have heavy lids, they're very deep. So it's kind of hard for people to get to their water meters. In the future, we're looking at programs with the utilities where the devices can actually be installed by either the utility or a professional installer to get around that. So that's kind of the challenge we have in Utah right now. But there is a lot of interest from utilities in Utah to actually do some programs with us, mainly so they can get this data, because it's kind of, unless you have this granular data, it's really difficult to try and do this type of analysis.
Gotcha. What does the customer interface look like? And does it have a way of determining indoor and outdoor water use?
Yeah, certainly. In fact, I can pop up a slide really quick if you want that shows.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And it definitely has the capability. It's not the interface that has the capability. It gets analyzed on the Flume server and then brought back to the interface to show people. But yes, it's one of the important features is really the information that the customer gets available both on their smartphone or computer. A lot of people choose to log in through their computer to look at the Flume data.
Yeah, so here's what it looks like. So this is looking at it by the day. And you can see here, this light blue is indoor, the green is outdoor. But if you were to click on, for instance, Monday here, it would then go down to the hour, and then it would show you the indoor versus outdoor by the hour. And then if you click on the hour, it'll go down to the minute. And then you can see by the minute how much water is used indoor and outdoor. So that is all available to the homeowner. And very soon it's going to be, I think we're about 2 months off until we're offering our first glimpse into fixture disaggregation, where we'll be showing people what their toilets are using, what their showers are using, and be able to drill down to that next level.
It's really interesting. With the leak detection side of it, is it just an alert, or does it have the ability to turn off the system?
We don't have the ability to turn off the system. The problem with turning off the system is that all of a sudden, a very simple installation turns very complicated. Because with the shutoffs, you actually have to get a plumber involved to cut pipes and install a shutoff. We wanted to have this to be very, very easy to install. And to be totally honest with you, about 98+% of the leaks we find are slow leaks. So those are the things that as soon as you find out about it, I mean, they're not they're not disastrous like a broken pipe or something. You know, they've probably been going on forever anyways. But we let people know about those small leaks and they fix them before they actually become giant leaks. So having the shutoff valve is kind of cool, but it's very costly, and it's kind of this barrier of entry to even get the device installed to begin with, we find.
Gotcha, that makes sense. Have you guys looked at any data from smart irrigation controllers in conjunction with this?
Great question.
Very good question. In fact, we have an integration with Orbit. Orbit makes the Beehive controller, and we have lots and lots of customers that have both a Flume and an Orbit. And in those cases, basically what happens is anytime the Orbit controller turns on, it tells Flume, I'm turning on. And then when it turns off, it tells Flume, okay, I'm turning off. And by the way, that was zone 1. So then we tell Orbit, okay, during that time, it used this much water. So now on Orbit's app, it can tell somebody how much water they used. And now they can see, okay, zone 1 used 50 gallons last week, it used 50 gallons this week. And oh, today it used 75 gallons. Oh, something wrong here. You know, there must be a leak in the system. So that's great for the homeowner, but also it's really allowed us to train our models, because we have millions of irrigation events that we know are irrigation events because Orbit's telling us. So when we're training our models of what's indoor and outdoor, it's been extremely valuable. That's why our indoor versus outdoor disaggregation is so good, because we just have lots and lots of good training data that's very accurate.
This is so cool.
So the other thing I want to also say, we also have done analysis for, I don't know if I'm allowed to say what utility, that where we looked at homes with smart controllers and other customers, and we looked at their reaction to climate events. And yeah, the smart controllers definitely, you know, were very effective at shutting down irrigation, you know, after rain events and in response to changes. But so was everybody else. That was what was the big takeaway, was that the people who didn't have smart controllers were their percentage changes were not that different. So it was a little bit hard to say that the smart controllers were saving a lot when everyone else was making, you know, pretty much the same changes.
Interesting. So you mentioned with Utah just the issue of accessing the meter to install these. What other issues have you guys run into, like related to reception or topography or clients?
So as long as you can access the meter, that's usually the challenge. And it's only a challenge in certain parts of the US. You know, in warmer climate places, getting to your access to your meter is easy. On the East Coast, it's easy because it's usually in your basement. So there's usually two things. One is just getting to the meter, but the other is we work on about 95% of the water meters. There's about 5% of water meters that we don't work on, so that sometimes is a challenge. And those tend to be, you know, when a utility decides to start using the meters we're incompatible with, it's usually utility wide. So we know, you know, in certain city X that we just don't work for because they have all incompatible meters. That usually is by geography.
Gotcha. So it sounds like this person might have 2 meters. So how is Flume applied if you have both a culinary and an untreated water meter?
You can put two Flumes on.
Okay.
And you can use the same app to monitor both. You can switch between them very easily.
Gotcha. And then maybe just touch on this a bit more, but someone's wondering if Flume can be installed on lawn irrigation systems as well, or
if there's a meter
system.
If there's a meter, I mean, if you had a normal positive displacement meter, sure, you could install a Flume on an irrigation system.
Okay, I'm sorry, I read this question wrong. It sounds like they have a well.
Same thing. As long as you've got that, you need the meter. If you've got a meter that is compatible with Flume, you can measure anything, and Flume will work on a small, anything up to a 2-inch meter. So that gets you into small commercial too. And now Flume cannot disaggregate the commercial data because it's not the same. Residential data is very discrete, and the patterns are better understood for the machine learning. So it's a different thing with commercial, but you can absolutely use it for leak detection and for monitoring and water budgeting, and many of the other functionalities in a non-residential setting.
Gotcha. Does it work on both the ultrasonic and the mechanical meters?
Just mechanical meters.
Okay.
So the ultrasonic are the 5% that we don't work on. There's basically 3 we see in the market. There's the Census iPearl, there's the Neptune Mox series, and then there's the I said Census
Badger.
iPearl, the Badger E series. So, but we're not seeing a whole lot of those out there. People started to install those, and then we're starting to see a trend of going back to mechanical meters. Battery life's an issue on those. Plastic parts is an issue. So it's going to be interesting to see where everything goes in terms of metering.
So of all the data that you've showed us, are all of these installs voluntary?
Yeah.
They are. Okay. And so if so, oh, go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry. You can ask the second part of the question.
It says, so if so, does this impact how managers should interpret these results? Do you think conservation-minded people tend to get these more than others?
Yeah, great question. So our devices are distributed 2 ways. About half of our customers go onto Amazon or a website and just buy a device. They're looking for either leak protection, or they're looking to get a device to help them because their water bill was super high and they're trying to figure out why, or they're conservation minded. So that's kind of one of the population. The other segment of the population buys through a utility program, which means that the utility is marketing our device to their customers, and they're subsidizing the device. So the customers could be paying anywhere from $0 to $100 for the device, depending on how much the utility is actually subsidizing. So because of that, our device is getting into a lot of low homes that wouldn't have gotten a device anyways. It's not necessarily conservation-minded people. So it's kind of getting into a little bit broader demographic. So I would say that our sample on the whole is not a perfect sample for the average home in a district or a state or the nation. But as we get more and more of these devices out there, we've got a lot of devices. So we get closer and closer to the average, we feel. But you're right, we probably skew a little. We know we skew a little wealthier. We know we skew a little bit more conservation minded. So the sample's not perfect, but we think it's pretty good. And Peter, you're the scientist, so I'll let you comment on that as well.
Well, I agree. I think it is pretty good, and if someone is interested, we can certainly draw a scientific sample from the data that we have. But Joe and I have sliced and diced and looked across different utilities at different data. So one of the things that we see is differences across geographies, like we showed you. Where there could be slightly higher water uses, but generally very similar patterns of usage. So I come back to the previous work that I had done, where we were very happy with a sample of 60 houses, to represent a utility. And now we're looking at samples of 400, 500, 1,000, in some cases several thousand, multi-thousand of houses from one utility. So which is better? I mean, the scientifically drawn 60, or I believe that ultimately Flume is getting closer to what is likely to be, and also because of the duration of the time period that you're measuring. And the previously we looked at just 2 weeks. Again, there's easy ways to check when you compare with actual consumption meter data. And we've done that with some utilities, and so far what we've seen with San Antonio is they may trend higher, if anything. That Flume users may trend higher than overall, but that's largely driven by outdoor, not by indoor. So I think indoor is where I think there's no question that there might be more higher outdoor use. The question would be whether there would be a difference in indoor use, and that I am not sure that there really is.
How many customers do you guys have?
It's in the tens of thousands now. We're certainly approaching 100,000. So we should be there hopefully by the end of the year.
That's impressive. So this person's wondering how the meter works. Well, I guess it's not really a meter, but does it need a meter to work And is it possible to use it on unmetered secondary water?
No.
Need a meter. Got to have a meter. It's basically the water flows through the meter, and inside the meter are magnets. That's a magnetic drive meter. That's the standard way a positive displacement meter works. And then there's sensors that can pick up the change in polarity. This is the same way that meters have been data logged for years and years. Now, the Flume sensor is more sophisticated in a number of ways than many of the previous devices, and actually is much more accurate in how it visualizes the spinning of the magnet. But that's how you have to have a meter. So if it's unmetered, you're out of luck.
So since we're talking about the meter, so how does Flume differ from the AMI meters that cities are starting to install?
Well, those are actually the water meter.
Right.
I mean, Flume is compatible with most AMI systems. So you could use Flume and have an AMI system. So can't think of them as like, they're not really competitors. They're just different devices. And there's many utilities that are using Flume in addition to their AMI because it provides information, particularly for the customer, that's not available at that high resolution. And also, frankly, it's for the utility level too. It's providing information that's not available.
Gotcha. So
Yeah, just to give you an example, we, as Peter said, we work with a lot of utilities that actually have full AMI systems, and they have two problems still with AMI. One is that the data that's provided to the customer, if they're providing any data to the customer at all, which in a lot of cases they're not, it's not very granular. It's at best, it's 1 hour intervals, and it's 24 hours delayed. So if you're trying to diagnose a leak or trying to figure out how much water your irrigation's using, it's not super useful. And then second of all, the data that the utility is getting from the AMI systems, again, it's the same granularity. It's at best 1 hour usually, and that's in the best systems. And it's really hard to know, other than total water use, what's indoor, what's outdoor. You can kind of tell who's got leaks, but it's not super accurate. So adding Flume even on top of that type of system is super valuable to, again, both the homeowner as well as the utility.
Gotcha, that makes sense. If someone moves, can they take their device with them?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And then when you guys, we have a few more questions, but when you have a minute, will you put the website in the chat box that you mentioned earlier for people to access?
Yes. It's, in fact, I can just tell it to you, it's pretty easy. I'll put it in the chat box as well. It's index.flumewater.com. Yep, maybe I'll put it in there.
You can pick your favorite version.
Okay, so back to the Marin County example. Was there any concern about homeowners being penalized for using more water and the city being aware of it because they had the Flume system?
Well, so Marin wasn't using the Flume to identify individual customers. We were just looking at customers, and that was looking at customers in aggregate. They did look at it at an individual level to determine whether, just get a sense of whether people were complying with their restrictions, whether they're getting the level of response that they were hoping, but it wasn't used for, it wasn't an enforcement, part of an enforcement action. I'm working with Marin actually now helping them devise both their long-term conservation strategy and short-term enforcement. And they understand that this is not information that is appropriate to use in that manner. You can only use the utility meter for doing that sort of if you were going to either curtail or send somebody a fine or something, you would have to base it on the utility meter, not on something like a Flume meter.
Okay, that's clarifying. Thank you. Do you guys offer coupons, or do you know of any water agencies that promote the product? I'm reading this terribly. Do you offer coupons or work with water agencies to promote the product if they would like to offer a rebate?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, we work with, it's between 50 and 100 utilities now. where we have like formal programs, formal rebate programs. And the way that works usually is we set up a landing page. So for instance, Marin, people go to flumewater.com/Marin, and it goes to a Flume page. Somebody can learn all about the Flume product. If they want to buy one, they click buy now. And when they buy the product, they actually get the rebate up front. So instead of paying retail for the product, they're paying the product, they're paying retail minus whatever the subsidy is. So I think in Marin, they pay, I want to say they pay $75 at checkout or $100 at checkout. And then we ship the device to the customer installs it. And as soon as the customer installs it, we give the customer a $25 refund just to incent them to get the device installed. So when all said is done, I think the out-of-pocket Marin customers pay $50 to $75 for the device. So that's how the utility programs work. We do a lot of the heavy lifting. It's pretty easy for the utilities to do that. And then in exchange, we give the utilities essentially a way to view the data from all of these devices that they've deployed through their rebate programs. And when the customers buy the device, they actually click a box that says that they agree. They agree to a bunch of stuff, but the main thing they agree to is to share their data back with the utility.
Okay, cool. So that kind of leads into the next question. When you work with a utility, do they get aggregated data from you, or do they get it for individual and identifiable meters?
So what we provide to them as a part of the program is individual data. So they can go to any address that has a Flume and actually look at minute-by-minute data for each of their customers. What's not included is doing the type of analysis that we showed you in aggregate. So what we then do for a lot of utilities is do things like end-use reports and reports where we kind of break down the indoor and outdoor usage for them and compare it against ET and look at water budgets. And we can do a whole bunch of slicing and dicing of the data in aggregate. And those things are usually done as kind of consulting agreements, if you will, where we provide them, certain types of reports based on that data.
Oh, that's really cool. So if there is a utility interested in this, who's the best contact?
Certainly, I'll put my email. I'm not the best contact, but please contact me and I'll get you in touch with the best contact. I'm going to put my email address in here for you.
Great. While Joe's doing that, that's it for questions, and we're coming up on 3 o'clock, so we'll wrap this up. I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Peter and Joe, for your time. That was fantastic. As always,
thank you for having us.
Yeah, you bet. As always, these are recorded, and we'll get it up on YouTube. Hopefully sooner than later, so you can rewatch or share with others. Cool.
Great. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, guys. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.